Welcome to Literary Liturgy, a space where I treat reading as ritual by taking a slow and intentional approach to dissecting and analyzing the books and stories that really light me up and ignite me as a reader, but also as a writer. For those of you that don't know me, my name is C. If you do know me, welcome. I appreciate you checking me out. This is officially episode 1. I did record episode 0, which should be posted wherever you're currently listening to this. And that was more so of a kind of episode where I provided background as to why I'm even doing this in the first place. What's the point? How did I get here? But just for those of you who haven't, watched that or listened to that yet, I essentially just want to make it a practice for myself as a writer to read more, right? I only recently kind of assumed that the identity as a writer, and when I did that, I quickly realized I need to read more. I tried endeavoring to really focus on writing a novel that I've been working on, and I just realized that, hey, I need to read. I need to really dissect literature more. Like, I haven't done that since I was in school. Um, and I do think that it will inform me in my practice as a writer. So here I am doing this publicly as a way to hold myself accountable to actually doing it. So, so yeah, if you're here, I'm glad that you chose to tune in or listen in with me today. So the way I'm looking to format this is each month I choose a book that I read throughout that month, and then um the first week of the following month is when I'll be dropping an episode, hopefully on the first Sunday, you know. And so yeah, like I really want to start treating reading and talking about what I'm reading in a very intentional way. So, the first book that I will be talking about today is Dawn by Octavia Butler. Um, you know, if you know, you know. When it comes to Octavia Butler, people regard her as a prophet because of some of the things that she's written about having come to pass in contemporary times. And so I don't know why I chose to go Dawn for my first Octavia Butler book instead of like Parable of the Sower or any of her other works, but that's what I chose to do. And so I do intend on reading all 3 of the books that are in this trilogy. I think originally it was called the Xenogenesis trilogy, but has since been renamed the Lilith's Brood trilogy after the main character in the book. So a little bit of background. It is kind of a sci-fi post-apocalyptic story. It was originally published in 1987, which I think is interesting, but also appropriate given the fact that um, during that time, the Cold War was going on, right? If you know anything about history, there was a real fear and threat of nuclear war. Um, that people lived with on a daily basis. And so this came out, she wrote this during a time where it would have made sense for her to be speculating on what would life be like after a nuclear war. And so essentially our main character Lilith is that's exactly what she's dealing with, right? She wakes up on a what she finds out is a alien ship. She's been abducted by aliens. And kept captive for 250 years in kind of like this sleep or stasis state where, they may have woken her up periodically, where they've done all types of genetic modifications on her. Um, and essentially, the purpose of this was because the alien species, kind of the hallmark of the species is that they look for other species to exchange genetic material with, to if they see there's a characteristic or a trait that another species has, they might determine like, okay, this is appropriate for a trade. And then they essentially mate with the other species and create hybrid species, right? So essentially, they've gone around Earth and collected as many humans that they could find that were still alive after nuclear war pretty much has decimated Earth, made it pretty much largely uninhabitable by humans. Um, and so that's what Lilith is faced with when she wakes up on their ship. Um, and specifically, what the alien species, which is called the Oankali, that's how I'm going to pronounce it, um, what they've identified in humans as a trait that they want to replicate is cancer. So Lilith herself has a history of cancer, breast cancer in her family. She did have, I think, some cancer cells. And they were fascinated by this because they have the ability to genetically modify humans and themselves and other species. And so, if you think about what cancer does, is essentially a replication of cells, often uncontrolled. But they would be able to go in and modify those traits that cause cancer to run rampant in a body and make it controllable, and use it, for instance, to for cell regeneration or limb regeneration. Like, let's say you lose an arm, you'd be able to grow it back, right? So that is what this species has identified in humans as worthy of exchanging genetic material, right? So where Lilith comes into play, right? Like, what's the point? What is it they want with her specifically? They have identified her as the most worthy, most viable candidate to sort of serve as an ambassador between the two species, right? So they acclimate her to their alien species because they look very alarming, very crazy. So it takes her time to get used to the way they appear. They have to um, kind of eventually they disclose to her that they have the intention of crossbreeding with humans. And then ultimately, they have the intention of returning back to Earth in order to repopulate Earth with this crossbreed species. So that's pretty much what they want Lilith for, is like they want her to choose the first brood, right? Hence the Lilith's brood trilogy. The first brood of humans or two that they can or the first brood of humans that they can create this hybrid species with. So Lilith has to go through kind of this dossier of all the different humans that they pre-selected some humans that could be viable candidates, and she has to go through and determine, okay, who's going to be the first ones that I wake up, who has the best traits, who has skills that are going to be viable, who's going to be most calm when faced with the fact that they pretty much have their life as they know it is just non-existent and they don't have any say in the matter. Like, who are going to be the best people to take on this feat. So yeah, that's pretty much kind of a high level summary of what the book, the plot of the book itself. And of course, there's several major themes that are brought to light throughout the course of the story. One major thing being consent, right? Because the Oankali have identified humans as being the species they want to trade genetic material with, but humans have not really had a say in this situation, right? So it brings up the question of, consent and the ethics behind it. And there's even points in time where Lilith is trying to appeal to the aliens and say, hey, this is kind of not right. It's not ethical. She even compares the way that the alien species treats humans with how humans have treated animals and other species on Earth. She makes that comparison. So I thought that was a really interesting comparison. It also kind of made me think about humans and the way we try to appeal to a higher authority, whether that's, whether you believe in God or a creator or whatever. And a lot of times we project very human traits onto whatever we believe in because that's what our human minds can conceive of, right? But in this case, and similarly in the case of a god, essentially they're not human, right? And so we can't operate under the assumption that they are going to have the same values as us, have the same logic as us, have the same motivations as us, right? We create something and we assume that, in most cases, we create something and we care about the thing that we've created. We do it for amusement, but also in most cases, because we want a specific outcome, right? Maybe not. Maybe in terms of, a higher power, for instance, and this is kind of going off on a caveat, but this is something that came up as I was reading. Like, humans do this all the time. We question God and why and all these things. And perhaps we don't have a way of knowing why because we can't conceive of the motivations of a power, an entity that is so powerful as to have created Earth and all the species on it, um, in such a very patterned and intentional way, right? We can't fathom it, right? So again, that was very interesting because she continually tried to appeal to them and like, hey, this isn't right. And they were like, we've committed to the trade. I think that's what they said verbatim. We committed to the trade. Like it is what it is. But yeah, so another major theme that is kind of comes up within the story as well is sex and gender, because this is an alien species. They're a little bit different in that they have three genders. And of course, in humans, there's gender identity and all those things, but they actually have three genders. And when they create families, they do so in with three partners. So there's a male, there's a female, and then there's a non-gendered third partner, who's also the partner who happens to be the one who does all of the genetic modifications and has the capacity to do that, right? They're the ones who aid in the reproductive process and all those things. And so, when later in the book, when Lilith actually does wake up some of the other humans, that's one of the things that they struggle with is this third gendered, thing that they can't really wrap their head around what it is and how it operates within the dynamic, um, the relational dynamic with the Onkali. So that was, a very clear theme throughout the book. Also, the theme of like social hierarchies. That was one of the things that they expressly stated to Lilith that they saw as a downfall of humans, is that they have social hierarchies within the human race. And that's what led to nuclear war on Earth in the first place, right? Not regarding each other as equals, but putting each other in categories based on, race, uh, gender, ethnicity, nationality, all these things. That they found to be a fundamental flaw of humanity. And we also see these hierarchies come into play once Lilith does wake up humans, because there are humans from, all across the globe. And we see certain characters kind of assume the role or want to assume the role of the leader by virtue of who they were in their life on Earth, right? What identities they had, and what those identities kind of said as far as like their power, in the greater scheme of humanity, right? Particularly in Western culture. So these were kind of the three key themes that I identified throughout the book. But being the writer that I am, and of course, me choosing to read with the lens of a writer intentionally in order to um, just become more skilled at crafting great stories. One of the things that I paid particular attention to is the theme of names, like the significance of names in this book. So, for instance, the name of this species is Onkali, and there's a part in the book where one of the partners of Lilith's partners, um, there's a part in the book where they tell her that their name kind of translates to Gene Trader, right? It means Gene Trader. So the way how they identify themselves speaks to what they do and what their purpose is, right? That's very intentional, right? So, when you're writing as a writer, when you're writing a story, you could choose any name for any given reason. Um, but I think that a key element of the story was that, the author was very intentional about how she chose names or the significance of names. Another example is that within the kind of triad family dynamic, the way that they identify each other and how you know that you're a part of a specific family is that when you are greeted and you tell someone your name includes every person in every partner in your family, right? In your triad. So there's a way to identify you as an individual, but then you're also identifying your other two partners, right? And then you're also identifying your role within the society, within the species, because the Onkali, they are gene traders. And so there's different subgroups that do different things kind of to further the species along. And so there's some who stay on the ship and they, maybe continue to look for other species. And then there's some who are specifically given the role of, hey, these are the people that are going to go to Earth and are going to procreate and create a new species and propagate and populate Earth. And they're given a specific term or a specific label. And so when you introduce yourself, the person that you're introducing yourself to knows what your name is, your partner's names, and what you do, what your purpose is, what you're here for. Similarly, when children come into the picture and they introduce themselves, they have their own name, their given name, and then they have the names of all of their parents. And so I think that kind of also reinforces the idea that like I said earlier, they regard hierarchies within the species as being like a flaw. And so the fact that their names include everybody in the relationship, I think is significant to show that they don't supposedly have these hierarchies. And I think that's intentional again with the whole naming thing and just showing the significance of names throughout the book, because when we circle back to our main character, her name is Lilith. And I thought that was really interesting, an interesting choice, because, if you don't know anything about Lilith, depending on who you ask, some belief systems or mythologies regard Lilith as a demon. Some see her as Adam's first wife who left the Garden of Eden because she did not want to submit to Adam, and therefore given a negative kind of connotation surrounding her name and what she represents because she was not obedient. But on the other side of things, there's people who regard Lilith as a symbol of dark feminine energy, because she represents the wild, the untamable, sovereign, and often repressed feminine aspects that, as women, we are taught to kind of not value. We are conditioned in very specific ways to value very specific things, and play a specific role within society. So Lilith kind of represents the opposite of that to some people. And then to other people, because she represents those things, she's demonized for other people. So I thought that was interesting because, Lilith kind of being the ambassador between the two species and essentially being mother to these humans that are going to be repopulating the earth. It's interesting because I don't know if I mentioned that Lilith is Black. She's Black. They've genetically modified her, and in doing so, they've given her like superhuman strength, for instance. And we all know some of the stereotypes and tropes that already are associated with Black women, whether it's the strong Black woman trope, whether it's the hyper-masculinization of Black women, or just masculinization of Black women, period. And so these tropes are kind of made literal because she literally has super strength. And once they find that out, that just adds to the reason why there's some people within the group dynamic that don't necessarily trust her. She has aligned herself with this alien species, even though she doesn't really have a choice in the matter. She's already Black, she's a woman, and she's aligned herself with aliens. So they don't trust her. And I think there's irony in that because they're demonizing her for these traits, but ultimately, if they just accept the reality of the situation and take away, strip away kind of their preconceived notions based on how life was on Earth and how humans functioned in a social order, they would realize that she's the key to their liberation. Because literally they have to go through her to be accepted to go to Earth. They have to be taught to accept the Oankali if they're going to mate with them, right? Reproduce with them. They're going to have to be taught how to like function on Earth because it's been made inhabitable. There's what, it's over the course of 250 years, it has regenerated, but it's very different than what they remember, right? There's different species, plant species that may have been safe to consume before aren't anymore, and there's new species. Um, and also, there's not the infrastructure anymore that was once there. So they're essentially having to start from scratch, caveman days. And so they're going to have to learn survival skills. She's the one who's going to teach them to do those things. So literally, she's the key to them getting back to Earth. Even if they don't want to mate with the Oankali, they have to get to Earth to be able to kind of leave and do their own thing. They don't have any control while they're on the ship with this alien species. And so I don't know. For me, it kind of just showed that the author was intentional about her choice in names. And I find that particularly important as a writer because, we get to a point we got to choose names for our characters. And it can be done randomly and the names can be mundane. But I also think that there's something to being intentional about your choice in names for your characters. It's kind of like you speak over your character without even knowing it, right? Similarly to what we do as humans, because it kind of reminds me of, so last year, my friend and I started a podcast where we did something similar to this. It wasn't as in depth, but we did talk about different books that we had read throughout the month. And we discussed Matriarch by Tina Knowles, which is an autobiography by Beyonce and Solange's mother, Tina Knowles. And one of the things that struck me when I was reading that book is where she talked about how she came up with their names. We know Beyonce is a family name, but their middle name, or Beyonce's middle name, and then Solange's first and middle name, she talked about where she came up with the idea for their names. And in both cases, I can't remember the specifics, but in both cases, there was like significance to the names. Like there was an air of importance around the names and what they meant that kind of spoke to her. It wasn't a random baby book. I think she actually did look in a baby book, but it wasn't just like, I like the way the name sounds. There was like a meaning behind the name. And essentially, whatever that meaning was, it kind of was exemplified in the life that they went on to lead. Right. So it was almost like she spoke over her children, her daughters' lives by giving them these names that held really significant meaning. And I think that as writers, we can do the same thing by being really clear about and intentional about, hey, what does this name mean? What is the backstory? What is the etymology? Where does it derive? What does it mean? Um, things like that can really help to even characterize your protagonist, for instance. Um, can help to shape the narrative, can help to shape the story arc, the character arc specifically as well. And so that's kind of one of the major things that I personally took out of this book as a writer. And again, when I do read, this is a part of the point of why I'm doing this, is to look at it through the lens of a writer because I want to become a better writer. So things that I really pay attention to might not be what other people pay attention to. But that was the thing that for me really stuck out the most in this particular novel. And it made me reevaluate the way that I name my characters and to choose names that symbolize more of who the person is, who the character is. It definitely adds another layer of characterization. And so yeah, that's that's my 2 cents on the book. I don't want to belabor the conversation, especially with this being my first episode, kind of getting my feet wet here. So I appreciate you if you're still here. But I'd highly encourage you, even if you haven't read the book as yet, to go ahead and grab your copy and read it. I do intend on reading the entire trilogy. So for the month of February, I will be reading the second book in the trilogy, Adulthood Rights, and intend on recording another episode probably the first week in March. So yeah, I'm really excited for this. This has been really great to kind of just speak my mind, my insights to the books that really just speak to me and make me excited and motivated as a writer. So starting to lose my voice a little bit. I think that's my cue to wrap it up. If you've stuck with me this long, I really appreciate you and encourage you to read along with me in the month of February so that you can tap in on the next episode. And hopefully, I don't know, eventually I do want to get to a point where I'm able to do more interacting with, if I grow an audience here, more in person or in real time interacting with audience members, either through like some kind of live mechanism, whether it's YouTube or something else. Um, I would like to get there at some point. So we'll see, if it grows. If it doesn't, I'm not going to waste my time doing that. But one of the things that I said in my intro video was I do want to center myself in this process because I'm doing it for me. But obviously, if people find, value in it, that's great. And that's all the more reason for me to keep going. So anyway, thank you for tuning in. Like I said, my name is C. Um, this is Literary Liturgy. Have a good Sunday.